a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
He's keen to hear from you with any questions or comments, so jot the number down now if you haven't got it already. It's 1800 316 316. But right now I get to talk to actually one of my favourite young women. Each week on a Monday morning we check up on current political issues with the Australian Christian Lobby. And so it's obviously a special treat for me because this organisation, as many of you who know me, know that it's very dear to my heart. And so I'm welcoming to the program this morning ACL's South Australian Director, Ashlyn Vice. Ashlyn, it's such a privilege to have you as my first guest this week. Thank you for all you and the ACL team do on behalf of every one of us as Christian Australians.
Thanks, Wendy, and it's lovely to speak with you as always.
Yeah. I'd love to actually spend the time just talking to you about why a young woman actually is engaged in the things that you're engaged in, but we don't have time for that today. But maybe another day we'll get to that because I think you're such an encouragement to young people around the nation. But I want to talk to you about a few things that are happening politically, obviously. And before we do, I think you've had a good weekend because I've sort of seen that you had a volunteer lunch this weekend. People can volunteer with ACL. You do that particularly well, probably because you are just a young, vibrant young woman. But can you just tell us what happened on the weekend?
Yeah, sure. So we had a volunteer lunch on Saturday with about 80 to 100 volunteers coming to have fellowship together, hear some political updates. We had Senator Leah Blythe come and join us for part of it, and we interviewed her to discuss what some of the highs and lows have been in the first term, the first couple of weeks really of the federal parliament term. And she's one of South Australia's newest senators, took over from Senator Birmingham last year. She's just doing an absolutely fantastic job. She's the Shadow Minister for Stronger Families and Communities and has really strong convictions about protecting the parental voice in policy and in government decisions. And she's particularly passionate about education and making sure that we are providing our kids evidence-based education rather than ideology-based education. So just fantastic to have a conversation with her. And of course, I would invite anyone who's considering volunteering with ACL. There's always a lot of opportunities. We focused on equipping this weekend people to meet with their local member of parliament. And I, as the state director, am going to be supporting them to have those meetings, even coming along with them to some of them. So if these issues that I discussed with Wendy today interest you or concern you, have a look at our website and sign up for volunteering.
The access that ACL has to people like the senator you've just mentioned are unequalled across the country. And so I would also reiterate that every state and territory has somebody that you can contact and volunteer and be part of that. It's an amazing opportunity. Now, I want to get to, in South Australia, I know that there's been many attempts to decriminalise prostitution in the state. And that has ACL and along with others, but ACL have been in the forefront, have been able to push back on this, which would actually damage women and everyone in South Australia, to be honest, but particularly women. So tell me what's happening now. There's another push, is that right?
That's right. Unfortunately, there is. This time it's a little bit more of a backdoor push. So a lot of people don't know that at the moment in South Australia, there's more or less what I would call the 15th attempt in our state to decriminalise prostitution. There isn't a formal bill before our parliament, but there was a couple of months ago. So I'll just, explain a couple of things that have happened since April. In April, a member of parliament did put up a bill to decriminalise, or I like to say to normalise prostitution, because what this bill would have done, Wendy, is it would have allowed brothels in all residential areas. It would have shockingly allowed children in brothels as well as babies. So there was a provision in there specifically to allow infants in commercial brothels and children in brothels if it was their primary place of residence. So no restrictions around children not living there. There was a couple of other, really concerning things, removing all regulations from any brothel that had less than 6 people. So they used language when introducing the bill that it was a mild bill, but I would say it was anything but. So straight away ACL went to the media, and we were, very thankful that some of the mainstream media did publish articles highlighting the fact that it was going to allow children and babies in brothels. And then a couple of weeks later, the member who introduced it, Tammy Franks, strangely withdrew the bill. And, I cannot say for sure whether that was due to the public backlash or if this was always a part of her, because acknowledged that she doesn't believe that there's quite the support within the parliament to pass it right now, but she intends very much to see this bill introduced in the next term of parliament, and we've seen a few strategic moves since then to that end. So one of them is a motion to refer this matter to a law reform body, which is infamously known for supporting very progressive social reforms. It's the same law reform body that supported abortion to birth. So if that motion passes, this law reform body will come back with a recommendation to Parliament that's going to be hard for some MPs to ignore, because a lot of MPs do sit on the fence on this issue. And so having that recommendation just adds, a lot of, I guess, oomph or whatever you might call it to the decriminalisation argument. But even, we know as ACL...
Yeah, I was just going to say, because even, even with ACL and for yourself, you don't really want these women criminalised, do you? So that's the confusing part.
Yeah, look, the language does get a bit confusing. South Australia has what we call almost de facto decriminalisation at the moment. We do have criminal provisions. However, they're not really enforced. It isn't lawful. What's important, though, is there are provisions against pimping, third-party profiteering and brothel management. And those provisions are really, really key to keep within our laws, because we know that a lot of women in this industry are controlled. What we would support as ACL is what's famously known as the Nordic model, or otherwise known as the equality model, which would actually decriminalise the women selling commercial sexual services, and that's not from a place of supporting that industry in any way, but because we believe the better approach is to criminalise the purchase of commercial sex and the facilitation of that industry. And that's really in recognition that a lot of these women are exploited, are brought into this work under false pretenses or out of desperation. And then importantly, within the equality model, there are provisions to support women to exit that industry. So last year we had a very strong campaign in South Australia to introduce that bill. It nearly passed. It was just short of one vote. So, we've had a lot of things happening in South Australia on this recently.
Yeah, you have. There's another thing I wanted to talk to you about in South Australia, but before we do that, because I wanted to talk about, there was a report of a Catholic school forcing girls to share a bathroom with trans, but I just wanted to skip, first of all, to the whole South Australian Chief Health Officer saying that trans voices need to be heard in the stillbirth inquiry, because there's been a national backlash on that. I've seen a lot come up on Facebook, but it also on other social media feeds. Can you just explain to us what happened there and why there is this national backlash?
That's right. It's interesting, isn't it, to see what gains national attention. And there were many articles released in the Australian, but also in other mainstream media, highlighting the public's, I guess, disgrace with this comment that so she's a Chief Health Officer of the Women's and Kids Hospital here in South Australia, and so she was giving evidence to an inquiry in our Parliament on the issue of stillbirth. This inquiry has been set up to investigate how we can prevent stillbirths and also better care for women who experience that And there was just a comment said at the beginning of her evidence. She said that it's important to acknowledge the voices of trans women, or in other words, biological men who identify as women, and sort of recognising them as a key stakeholder within this conversation. And, of course, I think given the solemnity, the seriousness of the experience of stillbirth, I think a lot of women rightly found this quite offensive, given that, these people cannot get pregnant. No. And so, of course, they can't experience stillbirth. So off the back of that, there was just a lot of public comment on why we are, always giving these caveats to our evidence when in this case, it would have been just as relevant to acknowledge, I think one of the newspaper articles mentioned it would have been just as relevant to acknowledge the members of the UK roundabout society, or whatever you want to say.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think it was positive to see the reaction to that, and hopefully that does get panel members of that inquiry to really reconsider how they're framing this conversation, and how can we uplift women's voices and not contribute to this trend of silencing them.
Yeah, and it just goes to, it highlights the bizarre nature of some of this conversation. And so I will just go back to what I just mentioned before, that there's this report that in South Australia that there was a Catholic school that was actually forcing girls to share their bathroom with trans students. So, and I know that this actually aligns with your government policy, and probably policy right around the country as well. But I think you're going to be really taking this up. Is that right?
That's right. So I think it's important to take advantage of public momentum on this at the moment, and we see that a lot of parents are not happy about the fact that within even private schools, we're seeing policies come out that don't allow girls to have a right to privacy within their own bathrooms. And you've got to consider whether, girls are comfortable or even safe with those kinds of policies. So, yeah, look, what happened is a very brave mum reported to the news her experience of her daughter being told that she simply had to share a bathroom with a certain student who was a boy identifying as a girl, and if she was not comfortable with that, she'd have to use the disabled bathroom, which of course is preferencing the trans student very much over the girls. And it is a shame that kids get caught in the crossfire of this public conversation, but it is really important to highlight, because our government policy is the one allowing this and encouraging this. More than that, our policy actually allows schools to facilitate the social transition of kids, sometimes without parental approval. So there is wiggle room within our policy for an appointed teacher to decide it's in the best interests of this kid to be called their chosen name and be treated as the opposite sex, even where the parents don't agree with that. So that's absolutely shocking that the government is usurping the role of parents as the primary, caregivers and people who know their child the best. So ACL is going to be running some public campaigns on this.
I'm just so glad you are. For me, it's even more, it shouldn't be more shocking, but it is more shocking that it's in South Australia, because South Australia has been the one who's been the champion of women's rights. Like, right back with, the suffragettes 100 years ago, they were South Australian women who were fighting for the right to vote. And South Australia was the first to actually go there. And, in your parliament, I love going and seeing the gate that people were chained to, even because they were, protesting for the right to vote. And very soon after women getting the right to vote, one of the things that women actually really protested and won was the right to have their own bathrooms, their own toilets, public toilets, so that they could actually go back to work, they could be in men's spaces and feel safe. And now it feels like we're just throwing that down the drain and handing it right over. And
that's right. And some people might not make this connection, but I think it's, the comment made to the stillbirth inquiry is much bigger than just a simple comment, but it's actually signals a trend of silencing women's voices. And we see that with Jasmine Sussex, who has spoken out, and she made a simple comment that men cannot breastfeed, and now she is being sued for that public comment.
No.
So health leaders or repeated deference to these, I guess, absurd statements actually has large consequences for society at large, and we have seen that particularly when it comes to silencing women.
And so, Ashlyn, it never stops in ACL, I know that. You've got an election coming up early next year, am I right in that?
We do. So South Australia will have an election in March, and we are, over the next 7 to 8 months, really encouraging our volunteers and our supporters to engage with their local candidates and members of parliament. We've got a number of ways that we're supporting them to do that. So if you're interested to see what we're doing and some of the events that we'll be running as well to inform you on where your candidates stand, sign up to our updates and you'll be hearing from me through email. You can visit acl.org.au and click on the email sign up, and I'll be sharing a lot of updates in the next months leading up to the election.
So that's acl.org.au. On there you'll find all the details of every state and territory, so you can contact any of the directors in the states and territories. You'll also find that there's a button that you can click to get a weekly email. Now, I know we all get a lot of weekly emails, and this is one that you can take the time to look at, or some weeks you might not get to. But it's very well set out with different topics, and you can click on the different topics that you're interested in. So I do really encourage you to go to acl.org.au. If you're in South Australia, get in touch with Ashlyn Weiss, who you've just listened to. She's an excellent young woman. I have such confidence in Ashlyn. But also in every state and territory, you'll find somebody. Ashlyn, thank you so much for your time today. I've been really grateful to talk to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, thanks for having me, and God bless.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.